Being a veteran is a profound honor, one that carries with it the weight of service, sacrifice. We owe our veterans a profound debt of gratitude, not just for their service, but for the immense courage they show in transitioning back to civilian life. The Making History Project mission is to honor and preserve the legacy of our veterans by documenting and sharing their stories with future generations. We aim to ensure that the sacrifices and experiences of those who served are never forgotten, fostering a deeper understanding and appreciation of our collective history. Making History Project presents Echoes of Service.
All right, this is Patrick Russell. I'm interviewing Gerald Turley for the first time. This interview is taking place in Beaufort, South Carolina on October the 9th, 2024. This interview is being conducted by the Making History Project. So how are you doing today, Jerry?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right. Let's start by telling me, when were you born?
Colorado, a little town called Sedgwick.
Okay. And when was that? When were you born?
1931. That was the 17th of April, 1931.
All right. How old does that make you today?
93.
Okay. Very good. And tell me a little bit about your hometown when you were growing up. What was it like?
Well, I was one of 8 kids, and so I was pretty much fall in line and follow what everybody else was doing. And we moved from the farm that my dad was running, that was raising horses, and we moved into Nebraska, a little town called Ogallala. And there we lived until we were, I was 10 years old. And that's when we moved to San Diego. The war was on, and this was 42. And we did that in 1942.
So you were about 10 when you moved to San Diego during the war?
I didn't hear that.
You were about 10 years old at that point?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you think about World War II as a kid?
I was too young to appreciate it was, how much effort was being put into making it work.
And so your father had a farm, and then when you moved to San Diego, what did he do?
Dad and Mom both went to work in plants. My dad gave his up and very quickly got into construction and with equipment. And my mother continued to work in a building near the airport. And that was her base during World War II.
And where did you go to high school?
I went to St. Augustine High School. It's a Catholic boys' school right there in East San Diego. I took the bus each day over and came back.
And you graduated in
I was a terrible student.
Okay. Did you graduate?
I was more interested in everything else that was going on in studies. And the Augustinian priests that we had were all very good. One of them kind of took me under his shoulder, and that prepared me for my tour of the Marine Corps.
Okay. And how so? What did he do that led you to that choice? How so? What did he do that led you to that choice?
I think that I was playing basketball with a team of people, and they belonged to the Marine Corps Reserve. And they said, "Why don't you just join us, Jerry, and you'll get paid for doing what you're doing?" And so that was 1949, and I joined. And then the war came in June, but I was married in May to a young lady that rode the same bus I did back and forth to school, to high school. And we became good friends. And when the war came, they called everybody on active duty. And I was not a World War II veteran like most of the guys were. And I joined that was a long time ago. I did not go to the basic school. I did not go to Paris, Camp San Diego's Paris recruit depot. I was activated immediately, and in 5 months went off to the Korean War.
Wow, that was fast. So off you went to Korea. Where did you go in Korea?
Into Busan and Pohang. And I was a member of the Marine Reserve. They knew that I had not been to shooting my rifle and doing all of the things they do at the recruit depot. So they put me in a place where I could help the Marine Corps and not hurt anybody. I worked at the airfield and helped run the passenger side of it, bringing in new replacements and sending out the wounded. And I did that. And then the airplane, I'm seeing the group move to Pohang Dong along the west coast, and that's where we served the rest of our tour. That was a 1-year tour, and I did about 8 months up there. And to get there, we just threw everything in the back of a truck, and they gave us a road map, and away we went. So another guy and I, we were corporals or something. They made me a corporal. And then later, before I came home, they made me a buck sergeant. Still with no basic training. And I served that time, and they gave me a letter of appreciation for all I had done. I think that letter was in my jacket in Headquarters Marine Corps, because I got out of the Marine Corps completely. And about 8 months later, 6 months later, I put in for a commission, and they made me a second lieutenant and shipped me off to Quantico, Virginia. And that's where I spent my first days in organized Marine Corps training. It was very good for me.
And how did your family feel about you joining the Marines? How did your family feel about you joining the Marines?
Oh, my folks didn't. One of 8 kids. I was just like, I had 2 brothers that were in the Army, and both of them had served in Japan during the occupation period. And when it was my time to go, they just assumed I would do it anyway, and I did.
And what were your dates of service in the Marine Corps?
October 1949 to November 1980.
Okay.
About 32 years.
All right. Then what was your highest rank?
My last assignment?
Your highest rank while in the Marines?
Oh, I became a colonel,
Okay.
up through the ranks, and then was promoted again.
And so now you're in Quantico, and what happens next after your training there? Your first formal training?
After the first formal training, I went to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and joined Delta 2-8, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, and I stayed in that unit for 3 years, and then moved on to a 2-year assignment up at Norfolk.
So what did you do during those first 3 years?
During those 3 years, I thought I was doing my job about being an infantry officer. Whatever was necessary, I did it. With troops, without troops, all good planning, all good time for me.
Okay. And so as an infantry officer, what were some of your duties?
Leading men to prepare them in case we had another war, to get the Marines they gave me, get them ready for whatever battle would go on as an infantry officer. And that was just a very good tour of duty for me. I needed that as much as my troops needed it.
All right. And then from there, where did you go?
Then I went to Norfolk, Virginia for ceremonial duties, and at the NATO headquarters there in Norfolk, Norfolk. And when my platoon had honors almost every day for generals coming in and out, I remember standing and watch one day for Queen Elizabeth. She was going into Williamsburg to visit those areas during her visit during the 50s. And I did my 2 years there, and then I went back, moved my family back to San Diego. I went to Okinawa and served over there for a year. I spent 2 Christmases there. It was a 13-month tour, and I went on October and that October twice. And I had Christia there, and then I was back with Bunny again, and my kids. I had 3 kids by that time, and then I think we went back to Camp Lejeune. Yeah, we did go back to Camp Lejeune, and I became a regimental commander there. That's when I was a lieutenant colonel. I got the position when I was still a lieutenant colonel. It was a colonel's job. And then later on, they gave me my Eagles.
And how was that moment when you got your Eagles? How did that make you feel?
Well, I did a lot more in fire support coordination and making sure the 3 battalions, or the 3 companies, 3 battalions, operated every day somewhere, always in fields or ranges or whatever it may be. I kept them in the field most of the time.
Always getting them ready.
I'm sorry?
Always getting them ready. Being prepared.
You do the same thing for each of the battalions. You trained them the way you could, and you kept looking at their efficiencies where they were short or better. You worked on that until you got them up to the point where they were ready to go anywhere. And we did go to Europe for 90 days as a regiment. We got aboard ship, and I had my 3 battalions. No, I took 2 battalions over there. I left 1 battalion back in the States. And those 2 battalions were just superb. The 2 commanding officers were both later general officers. Good people. I don't know if I'm helping you, but I'm doing the best I can.
No, you're doing great. So from there, from being a regimental commander, what do you do next? After being a regimental commander, what do you do next?
After I was a colonel, I went to Marine Corps Base 29 Palms and took over operations for running the live fire combined trains, bombers, you name it, artillery, all sorts of infantry weapons. And I readily ran 15 or 19 of those exercises with each battalion doing something. Some of them went 2 battalions, some of them were single battalions. That came from all over the division, of the 1st Division, of the 2nd Division, and some of them even came in from Okinawa to go through. So every battalion had a chance to go through the CACs, and I put them through that to make sure they could do live fire. I didn't realize, but all of that training was the training for me as I come by to do the Easter Offensive.
Mm-hmm. And so what year was this?
The Easter Offensive was February 1972, and took place in North Vietnam, on the border between North and South Vietnam. And I went over there as an advisor to the Vietnamese Marine Corps. And they didn't anticipate that I would be in a much other position given to me by the Army later on.
Now, before that moment, did you do a tour in Vietnam before that?
I did a tour in Vietnam earlier, and I was in the 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines out of Camp Pendleton. And I did my tour there with that and had no real combat per se. For me, at my level, it was the company commanders on down. They did all of the work. We did the training, make sure they had what they needed to do. And that was the first tour. Then the second tour was training, but I was training other people, not my own.
Okay. So the first tour was when? What years was that?
The first tour was a routine overseas assignment in a combat area, and that went pretty good.
Do you recall the year that was?
That was 68, 69.
Okay. And what area were you in?
South of Da Nang, about 15 miles southwest of Da Nang, away from the port at Da Nang, to a little hill mass down below. It was run by Vietnamese soldiers. We didn't work with them at that point. We worked strictly as a battalion of our own.
And you were there for how long?
1 year.
1 year. And then you come back to the States, and what led you to returning 3 years later?
Well, 3 years later, I went back for the Easter Offensive. I wasn't. I joined a battalion. No, I didn't. I'm sorry. I joined the Vietnamese Marine Corps as an advisor and served as an advisor to them during that period of time. And I was the assistant senior advisor. I had a colonel, a good one. And then under him was myself, and then under us were about 35 officers and enlisted men, mainly officers, who worked as down at the battalion level with the Vietnamese Marines. Now, the thing that got me involved in it, the colonel went back to the Philippines to be with his wife for a couple of days, and I decided I would go north to visit my units that we had up there. The colonel approved me doing that, and so I got on an airplane and flew up to Phu Bai, which was close to Quang Tri, and there I began to tour with the Vietnamese Marines.
And this is when you became the US G3 advisor?
Yes, but that's a story on itself. Would you like to hear it?
That involved Colonel Murdoch, right?
Okay, on our own, I got off of the airplane. Some Marines picked me up in a Jeep. I stayed the night with them. Lived very nice. And then the next morning, we got in the Jeep and drove back to the division headquarters where the Vietnamese were running. The Vietnamese Marines had 2 battalions up there working with the ARVN Division in an area that was always available for Marines. And the day I got there, we had to get a briefing. They had to give me a briefing. They gave me a briefing by a major who was a Army officer. And he gave me a briefing, but it was a very limited briefing. It was the Chamber of Commerce. We got units here and there and so forth. And then we stayed at that headquarters, went out to lunch at their mess hall. That was my first meal in the next 5 days. And then I went back to the building, met with my G3 advisor, and he told me, the Vietnamese Marines, that 2 Marine battalions had just been hit by enemy soldiers, and one of them was killed. I knew that wasn't right because he was in Hawaii visiting his wife. And I says, okay, I'll stay with you here. I'll stay and help you out. But if it's a Marine unit, I'll tell you if it's good or bad or whatever the information is that you want me to do, I will do that for you. He said, okay. More and more I stayed there and helped in the COC, about a room about 10 foot square. It had my radios and my communications systems that the Army was doing to communicate with all of their ARVN units and also with their 2 Marine units. I stayed there and worked for the major on the Vietnamese Marines. His colonel watched me help him do some of his work, some of the basic things that you just do. And The colonel called his major in and talked to him, and his major was not very, not very, had never been under fire before. And he was very concerned about the constant incoming of artillery rounds. And he took very good care of himself to make sure he didn't get hit. The more I worked with him, the more I realized he had no background. He was a nuclear, bionuclear guy who worked in, his primary area was working on troops who had gone through some type of a nuclear, training, and he did nothing else beside that. He didn't know how to destroy, he didn't know how to position Vietnamese people, his own people, or anything else. I'm sorry. So I helped him as best I could, and finally the colonel came in and says, help him out. I says, I'm doing as much as I can. And later on the colonel came in and put his hand on my shoulder and said, you know, I want you to take over. And I said, I can't do that, sir. I'm a Marine from another unit. I have no responsibility up here. I'm up here to visit my Vietnamese Marines and then go home in 2 days. And he says, no, I'm ordering you to take over. I said, sir? He says, yes, you'll have to take over running all of the Army's guns in addition to your Marine guns. And that meant I was in charge of B-52 strikes, air, close-in air, that's targets, and all of the Army. And then also we had off the coast, we had naval gunfire ships. We had 2 naval gunfire ships out there, which were running along the coast and hitting targets that we'd want to. So those are the things that I was doing that for the next days will play in the role of the director of training and operations, is what they called it. So ask me your questions.
Oh, didn't there come a time where Colonel Murdoch ordered you at that point? Is that the same point?
Yes, that's the same in.
Where you were to be the chief advisor to the 3rd ARVN Division?
Yes.
Okay. And I think you described that as you felt like your world was falling apart?
It was.
And how so?
Well, units weren't reporting. Other units were reporting. It was all sorts of misinformation in the air, and everybody's there trying to help each other, but they couldn't position the people correctly.
And then at a certain point, that's when the invasion took place, correct?
Yes, that's
The
when
Easter Offensive.
I told the colonel, I can't do that. He says, you go ahead and do it, like I'm telling you to do it. And I said, okay, sir, give me your Social Security number. And I got it. I wrote it down on a piece of paper and stuck it in my pocket, forgot about it. But that piece of paper saved my life in many ways.
Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of, we'll call it, interesting events that took place that led to the Easter Offensive and the lack of response.
The lack of response was that the the military and U.S. and also the ARVNs, we were all caught off guard by the veracity of their attack and so forth. And when I began to report certain things to my headquarters, to the Army headquarters in Da Nang, I had a horrible one-line telephone, or I could call them on the phone. We talked on that quite a bit. We didn't talk on the radio too much, but we received all of our words and instructions, and they couldn't believe it. I was having all of this problems when they were in Da Nang. No firing on them, nothing there. This was the beginning of the North Vietnamese attack to take over all Quang Tri, capture the city of Quang Tri, and literally go down across the border, down to where, to the old, where the capital used to be in Hue City. That was their plan.
And they were initially successful. They were initially successful by catching everybody off guard.
Well, they weren't successful because we were able to keep them back. Mm-hmm. I'll cover that in the briefing for the girls later on.
But they made certain inroads in the beginning.
Oh yeah, very definitely.
And at that time, there's a lot of misinformation.
Both ways. I'm passing information back to the headquarters down in Da Nang, and it was called FRAC, F-R-A-C, Free Assistance Command something or other. I didn't even know how to spell it. But I began to talk to them, and they had a lieutenant colonel who got on the phone, same rank as I was at that time. And we argued, and I said, I'm going to blow the bridge at Dong Ha. He says, you can't do that. We're going to make our attack to go back up and get that bridge. I says, no way, I'm going to blow the bridge. And then we continued to fight over that over then. He says, I'm ordering you not to do it. And I says, everybody's ordering me to do something. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. And that's what I did.
And why did you feel it was necessary to blow that bridge?
Well, the enemy was coming across they had 40,000 troops. No, they had 40,000 troops, and we had about 15, including all the Vietnamese Marines, ARVN and Vietnamese Marines. And I kept them. That was our forces side by side. You could tell that the enemy, the NVA, were they were in the attack mode, and they were coming all across the front line. We had a river that went across, and I checked the river, and anything north of the river was Vietnamese. Anything south of the river was still us, our. So the enemy came at us with artillery, and in and around where we were the main command headquarters. That means you're going to get the most amount of troops shooting at you. And they did. They blew their artillery on us, on our guns, on our depots. We had nothing left. Right outside of the bunker was the Brigadier General Army, Vietnamese Army bunk. He had his little queue there, and he did that. And he moved back to Quang Tri, out of the artillery range. That meant all of the advisors who belonged to the 3rd ARVN Division, also had to move all the way back and set up a new headquarters back down there. And there was no doubt that they were going to come on, and the way they were going to come on was right down the front. Coming at us was Highway 1 that ran all the way from North Vietnam to South Vietnam to Saigon. I mean, it was all the way through. It was a 2-lane asphalt road. And the only thing that was in their way was the one bridge that I hopefully could get a hold of and destroy.
They also had tanks coming, didn't they not?
The tanks were coming down that road, MR1, right at us. And if I could stop the tanks coming across the bridge, that's why I wanted to blow the bridge. The tanks were coming, and there was no doubt about it. The bridge was going to have to go one way or the other. And so I took a young captain and an Army major who were working together earlier. I put them together, and as a team at the bridge, they worked on it until they were able to throw it away. They were able to blow the bridge on me as the North Vietnamese were rolling their tanks right up to the end of the bridge. We were trying to blow it. And we blew the bridge about 3 in the afternoon. And as soon as that happened, the whole attack by the North Vietnamese came to a halt. They had to figure out where they're going to be, what they're going to do, and come up with a new plan. They planned that they were going to take the bridge, but they didn't get it. I'll talk about that in the briefing later.
Oh, there was, before the bridge was blown, there was a Sergeant Luam. Tell me about what he did to stop a tank.
Well, he was up on the bridge helping do something else. And they got on the bridge, and they were about 100 yards from the North Vietnamese tank that was already there, ready to come up on the top. The Vietnamese, North Vietnamese, did not drive tanks like we do to get to open area and so forth. But he pulled that tank up out of there and got up there ready to go. And the Vietnamese sergeant shot a law at him, a little low-grade weapon, and it bounced off of the turret. So he backed his tank and got back down again. And there he sat, and even till after I blew the bridge.
So that initial shot gave you all enough time to blow the bridge because the tank stopped.
I had probably 8 hours to blow the bridge. Plenty of time.
And that involved Captain Ripley and Major Smock, correct?
Major Rounds, R-O-U-N-D-S.
Okay. And
I found them, I talked to John on the phone, on the radios, and he says, the Vietnamese were here, and they've got ammunition stacked here, big boxes of ammunition, but nobody has put it on the bridge, and where it's at, it won't do any good. So he and the major handling each little box of 50 pounds of supplies, would raise it up to Ripley, who was up on the bridge, up in the pilings. And Ripley was putting these bridges in a sequence on us, so when we blow them, it would blow the bridge. And I let that happen because at the last minute, those tanks were going to come across, and if they would have gotten loose, they would have tore us all to pieces. My position where I was 2 miles away, maybe 3 miles away from the bridge, and we got them out of there. So we blew the bridge, and that stopped the attack until the North Vietnamese could reposition themselves. And further inland was another bridge that I tried to get my artillery and my naval gunfire to shoot that far, but they couldn't shoot that far. It was too far inland for the naval gunfire, and the artillery folks wouldn't do it.
So while Captain Ripley is doing this, he's being shot at, though, correct? The Vietnamese on the other side, the North Vietnamese, they notice him, and they're...
As he would hang beneath the bridge, moving from one post to another, putting up the boxes of ammunition, climbing up in there, his body would be dangling below the bridge. So sniper fire was a lot of it. There was a Marine battalion there that Ripley was involved with, but they weren't doing anything as the battalion. They're on the line, killing the NVA who were on the other side trying to get back to us. And that kept his soldiers busy while Ripley and the major got together to blow the bridge.
So that was a big event during the Easter Offensive. It was a major event. That was a major event for the Easter Offensive.
It was.
A turning point.
It was.
Another turning point seems to be Camp Carroll and its surrender. Talk to me more about Camp Carroll and...
Oh, Camp Carroll.
And Lieutenant Camper and Major Brown.
Yeah, they were, the bridge was here, the North Vietnamese are along, and off to the left side down here was Camp Carroll. Camp Carroll was, had 22 artillery pieces in there, and they were using them, and finally at the end, somebody told me that the CO of the unit and the senior colonel on the other side on the North Vietnamese were talking to each other on the radio. I never did find out if that was valid or not, but it was another little bit of information that would make me realize how bad trouble we're in. So they put the bridge together, put up the things, and Ripley moved from box to box to box, putting in some type of a device that would make them all go off at the same time. And they did. The bridge went, I think at 3:30 or 4:10 or something, the bridge went. Mm-hmm. And I reported it as such, and they said, "You're on report." Who really gives a shit at that point?
And did Camp Carroll eventually surrender? Did you lose Camp Carroll?
Camp Carroll surrendered.
Okay, but Colonel Camper and Major Brown did not.
We got them out of there. They got on an H-56 chopper and flew into where we were. One of their hydraulic lines had been hit, so they fixed that, and then they went on down to Quang Tri and reported into the general down there. And the general called them bastards, that they were leaving their unit and all sorts of things. And it wasn't true at all. I ordered them out of there.
And they were advisors at that point, correct?
They were advisors to the Vietnamese Marines who were running the artillery, and
And I believe it was was it a Colonel Din is the one that surrendered Camp Carroll?
Yeah, I never met him.
Okay. But Camper and Brown left. They were not going to be part of that surrender. And then there came a point in time where you had to have a meeting with an Admiral Sulzer.
Oh. When it's over, I've received a phone call from the South saying the four-star Army General in charge, Buckner, would like to see you. Get down here as soon as you can. I took a plane ride down from Fubai. There was planes coming in, bringing in troops and so forth. I got on a plane and crawled up on one of their racks there up there behind the pilot and went to sleep for a half an hour or so. And then got off of the, I called them on the radio and told them I'm coming. They said, there's a Jeep waiting for you. And the Jeep was there to take me to see the Admiral first before I went to see the General. So I told the Admiral the story and pulled out a piece of paper and showed him that. So he said, you really were in charge. I said, that's right, sir. I was in charge. The Army took a Marine and stuck him in there so we would get the blame if anything went wrong. And that didn't happen.
So there was a question in time as to who is this Colonel Turley, correct? Who is this Colonel Turley? Does he exist? What, right?
Well, here I was. You'll have to understand that I was only on a trip like other Marines, and I got on the airplane, went up here, and I'm wrapped up in a battle, a big battle. I shouldn't have been on there, but I was. And that's what put me in charge.
And it should have been, in your mind, it should have been an Army person in charge, not a Marine.
That's right. It was an Army mission. By the way, the Army had they had 4 lieutenant colonels like me. And I went to each one of them while I was running the operations there. And I says, would you like to take over? Would you like to take over? Would you like to take over? And none of them would do it. They said they had more important things to do.
And why do you think ultimately a Marine was appointed to do this?
I don't know. But I did what they wanted me to do, to run their artillery and direct the artillery and the B-52s. And the B-52s, I had an Air Force officer there with me, and he could communicate with the communications people on airplanes, on where we would go and where we would do certain things. And that was the whole vacation. So when I told the Admiral the story, and I went and stood in front of his desk like you've sitting there, I saluted Lieutenant Colonel Turley reporting, sir. He said, Colonel, you better tell me what went on. And I went on the story. I pulled out my map that I had in my pocket and showed him what we were doing, what was going on. And I says, and then the Army colonel put me in charge. He said, really? My piece of paper came out. So I told him why I was in charge. The Army put me in charge. I wasn't in charge. I told the story. And he said, take a break. I took a break, made a head call, had a cup of coffee, felt pretty good. Sorry. I had my cup of coffee, and he called me back in, and he had two other admirals, two one-stars there. And I retold the story again to them, and the three of them were talking back and forth, and they said, I can't believe this is really going on. I said, so the admiral then, who was in whites, white top, Bermuda shorts, nice hat, that's what he was doing. He says, hey, we're going to go over and see the audit. We're going to go over and see the general. He wants to see us. I said, yes, sir, I'll go get cleaned up. He says, no, I want you to go the way you are. During the first day, I crapped my pants one day out there with a diarrhea or something. And I hadn't been the same since. I told that to the admiral. And I still stunk like I'd been there 5 days with dirty pants on. And we went to see the admiral. The admiral says, you get your Jeep and I'll meet you over there. So I took my Jeep. I had my rifle on my back, my M16. I still had a round in the chamber. Only then did I clear my weapon. And that was in Saigon. I mean, that wasn't a big thing, but it was a big thing to me. I cleared the weapon, drove over there, and got in upstairs in the second deck where the admirals and the general. The admiral said, General, I'd like to see you a moment before we have Turley in. So the general said, okay. General Wyan was his name. Wonderful guy. And he and the admiral, Salzer, and Salzer said, hey, you better be careful because Turley's got a piece of paper that says so-and-so put him in charge, the Army colonel. And he said, that's what it is. Well, I went in and I was standing there in my area, one corner, and in came a colonel friend of mine that I knew way back in other days from Okinawa. And he was there, kind of the escort for the four-star Army general. And then over here, in came either 6 or 8 brigadier generals over here. And I told this story. I'm standing there telling the story, and then I reached and pulled the paper out and said, here's my number. Here's what I got. Here's the numbers, his Social Security number. One of those guys, one of those admirals said, give me that. And I said, no way. This is mine. And that pretty well stopped any action on Turley at this point. That was the importance of that paper, to show that I was in there to do something and I did it. And it may not be popular with what I did, but no one told me anything else. No one ever gave me guidance in there to do something else. And so that was over. The admiral and the general talked. And they said, Turley, the admiral is going to Da Nang. And they're going to check in at the headquarters up there. And they're going to go at 5 o'clock this afternoon. Can you get your gear? I said, sure, I can get a shower. I'll be ready to go. I went to my room and got a shower, came back and got on the airplane. We went to Da Nang. I wouldn't go in their COC. I would not go in their bunker, command and control center. The guys that I talked to were there, the Army guys. We're all hearing that Turley is here. He's in our building right now. But nothing never happened to it. The next day, they said, you got a bunk for the night and you fly you in tomorrow morning. They did. They flew me in the next day and I'm right back in my old job again as the assistant secretary. and that was the Easter Offensive.
And did anybody ever address you blowing up the Dong Ha Bridge?
Well, they all asked, but when I told them that the war had stopped at the bridge that was blowing, they all agreed with that.
And then there came a point where you later on, I believe this was perhaps much later, you met a Major General Joe Fegan.
Yeah, he was a Marine general.
And what was the
He was
significance
the one
of
that
meeting
assigned me
him?
over there to go to Vietnam.
Okay.
He had nothing to do with that. He came from the 1st Division at Camp Pendleton.
But did he at a certain point address you about what you did during the Easter Offensive?
No, it was years later that I ran into him.
Did he tell you about his appreciation for the way you handled your job as a Marine? Did he tell you his appreciation for how you handled
that
your
was
job?
General Metzger. Yeah, it was Metzger who shook my hand and says, "Hey, congratulations." I said, "Yes, sir." No, we were still on the battlefield. He came down from the 3rd ARVN Division up in Okinawa. He flew into Da Nang to come up to see what was going on.
Okay.
And that's where I ran into him.
All right. So a Marine took on the Army's job and did well. Is that basically your story?
They gave me a Legion of Merit. That's a nothing award, as you know. But they took and redid it and gave me a Silver Star. Now that I deserved, if you'd look at it.
Okay. So you got a Silver Star for that command during that Easter Offensive.
And I brought a copy of the citation for my.
And so basically, you got assigned to do something that you were not expected to do. Kind
That's
of
true.
last minute. Then the whole world turned upside down on you.
Yes.
And it was a giant ball of confusion at that point.
Yes.
And then from that point, you were able to gather some control and make the best of the situation to slow down that offensive.
Yes.
And for that, you got the Silver Star.
Yes.
Even though in the beginning, there were a lot of people wondering, who is this Marine, this Colonel Turley?
But you could understand that. I had a nothing job in Saigon, and now I'm up here with the world falling apart. And the Army colonel put me in charge, and then he would come back. He would fly in the next day and come in with his helicopter, get out and come in and say, "How are things going?" I said, "I'm doing the best I can." And after I retired, he wrote me a letter. I never answered it. I have his letter, but I don't have anything else. But he didn't get a good job when he came off of Saigon, when he got his next tour of duty. That means you're out of the club.
So after the initial invasion, you spent about how many days not sleeping?
How many days
of not sleeping, just trying to address all the chaos?
Oh, I went 5 days without any. If I would, I had a desk about where you are there. Underneath of it, right down here, was a space. I would just lay down underneath of there so I could hear the radios going. And I did that for the 4 nights that I was laying up there in the bunker.
And at that point, you're trying to coordinate artillery missions,
B-52,
B-52 missions, and naval
gunfire, and all of the ARVN artillery.
Okay. Sounds like a very challenging time. And what happened after the Easter offensive? Where did you end up going after that?
I went back to Washington, D.C., and my change of duty, and I did a tour at Headquarters, Marine Corps, headquarters right in the Pentagon, right beside the Pentagon. And while I was there, the Israeli war came up. And lo and behold, we had to have a number of people go look. The Secretary of Defense took 5 Air Force, 5 Army, 4 Navy, and 1 Marine. That was me. And we went back and we did the tour of the battlefields. And I'm saying, you know, what I'm seeing here is the Vietnamese advisors had some Russians who helped them with their, like we did on the Kovan. And I felt that if that was true, they must be doing the same thing with the Vietnamese and also for the Egyptians, and they did. And I ended up briefing the Secretary of Defense, who was impressed with what we were doing. We then briefed the Chief of Staff of the Pentagon, and after that, Kissinger wanted to hear it, Secretary of Defense. So he took President Reagan, not Reagan, Ford, General Ford was the commanding general. I'm sorry about the names, but the same. And we went back over and I operated in the same way I did before, going wherever I saw information, and I jumped off of the Jeep, I did this, I did that. Only this time I have a free hand. I hadn't have that. When we came back, we briefed Kissinger, an Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, and myself. And after we briefed him, he says, "Has the President talked to you?" And I said, "No." So he arranged for us to meet with Ford and gave him the same briefing. And after that, I came back to the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps started having me brief all Marines everywhere on wherever we were, on the Easter offensive, not on the Vietnamese, not on the Israeli war, but on the Vietnamese.
And who was the Secretary of Defense that you were, do you recall?
I don't know. It's been a long time since I did that.
For sure. And so you're at the Pentagon, you're briefing the Secretary of Defense, Kissinger, and ultimately the President. And what became of that? Do you know?
What else do you want?
No, but what became of it? Do you know? What did they do with that information?
No, but the President had some very interesting questions.
Okay. Like what?
Oh, a comparison between, I told him that I was an advisor down here, now I'm over here, I'm doing the same thing. And I told him that there's no change that I saw in the training of the troops on both Vietnamese and the Vietnamese and the Vietcong. and the war in Vietnam. I says, the Russians are winning with the way they're training their people. And they did a good job.
What did the Russians do that was different, or what did they excel at in their terms of their training?
Well, I'm just talking about their training. I didn't run into any of them, but we took over a couple of buildings. There was Russian material in there. That's all.
And how long did you do your work at the Pentagon?
Oh, it was a one-day effort for the president. We did it in the command center in the White House.
Okay.
There were the Air Force Lieutenant Colonel and myself were the only two that got to the White House. Although there were 15 of these and 5 of those and 5 soldiers and all of that. When we got to the White House, we had an Air Force Lieutenant Colonel and a Marine.
And so that must have been something to meet the president to give him advice. And what did you do after your work at the Pentagon?
I went to 29 Palms and took over there.
Okay.
After I left the Pentagon, I went down to the 2nd Marine Regiment, and ran them for 2 years, and then I went to 29 Palms, was teaching fire support coordination. That's what you're really doing, fire support coordination.
So all the lessons that you learned from your battlefield experiences, you were passing that on now to commanders.
Yeah.
How to duplicate or improve. How to duplicate or improve those methods.
Well, you did that at 29 Palms. We were doing live fire exercises.
All right. So you've had a lot of moments and experiences as a Marine. Can you tell me in your own words what it is to be a Marine? How would you describe what it is to be a Marine?
If you're assigned to something, put your heart and soul into it. That's what you have to do.
And that's the ethos that the Marines teach you. And what would be your most memorable moment from your service in the Marines? And I know you've had a lot, but can you pick one?
My most memorable moment was telling the Marine Corps we need a Marine Corps museum, which we put at Quantico. And it started with me drawing up some parts of a build a new complete unit, and we did that. So my Corps was open for me to serve as the originator of the Vietnamese Marine Corps, of our museum. Not of the Marine Corps Museum, but yeah. It's there. It's a $200 million building standing there south of Quantico.
Okay, so that was a major achievement. All right. And you have a section there that's dedicated towards the Marines of Vietnam?
A couple things in the corner. It's like everything else.
Okay.
Time goes on.
All right. And how about this? What was your proudest moment while in the military?
I don't know. There were so many. Being a regimental commander was very, very special. I mean, here you are in charge of 3,500 guys. If you go to war tomorrow, you're going to lead them. And that's what I put my heart and soul into.
You mentioned that you were awarded the Silver Star and the Legion of Merit. What other awards would you like to mention that you received?
Well, I got a couple of Bronze Stars, a couple of Legions of Merit, a couple of Commendation Medals. I think that's about it. I got about 11 of them, or 9 or 11 awards of some type.
Okay. And what were the Bronze Stars for?
Little little events that happened as a lieutenant colonel in Vietnam.
Okay. And is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to add today?
No, I can't.
No, you think we've covered all the good stuff? Yes? All right. How about this one? This is the final question. Is there anything you would like to tell future generations? Any words of advice or wisdom that you would like to leave for future generations?
My advice is to know your job and then go and do it in spite of all of the things that can get in your way. That's it.
To persevere.
Persevere.
Okay. All right, excellent advice. Well, Jerry, it's been an honor and a privilege to meet with you today and to sit down and have you share your story.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you so much for your long and dedicated career and service to our country. Thank you.
The honor of being a veteran is not just in the recognition by others, but in the deep personal pride of having fulfilled a sacred duty. In celebrating veterans, we acknowledge the strength, resilience, and integrity that they represent. Through dedicated research, heartfelt storytelling, and community engagement, it ensures that the legacy of service endures and that future generations never forget the courage and dedication that have shaped our world. The Making History Project is dedicated to honoring and preserving the voices of our veterans. Thank you for your support.